Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 152nd annual meeting of the U.S. Naval Institute. I'm Ray Spicer, CEO and publisher here at the Institute, and whether you're joining here in person or beaming in remotely, welcome. It's great to see so many people here in the auditorium. We're going to get started here in a second. We've got a lot to jam in and not a whole lot of time to do it. So we're going to get rolling, but I'd first ask that you please rise and join me in reciting our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. It is great to see so many members, supporters, friends of the Institute here this afternoon. Many past and current members of our board of directors, our board of trustees, our editorial board are here in the audience. I want to single out a couple. Admiral Harry Harris, our chair of our board of directors, and General Pete Pace, our chair of our board of trustees. They have led the Institute during a period of extraordinary growth and continue to guide us as we embark on new priorities and projects outlined in our new strategic plan. We are pleased to have Samara Firebaugh here. I don't see her, but Provost of the Naval Academy, representing the Naval Academy. We think the soup is going to join us, but the soup's a little busy. The plebes climbed Herndon this morning, 2 hours and 28 minutes. And she's getting ready to unleash the class of 2025 on the Navy and Marine Corps, so a little bit busy right now. We thank our sponsor for the Institute's annual meeting, L3 Harris Technologies, and we're glad to have Rear Admiral Matt Gucci-Klunder, Vice President, Navy and Marine Corps Programs and DoD Labs at L3 Harris, here with us this afternoon. To kick off our annual meeting, I welcome Admiral Harry Harris, U.S. Navy retired, for opening remarks. Admiral Harris needs no introduction, but he's going to get one anyway. Commander U.S. Pacific Fleet and Commander U.S. Pacific Command before his retirement in 2018. Following his Navy career, he was appointed U.S. Ambassador to South Korea until 2021, a 1978 graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy. I'm surprised I didn't hear. 78. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And a naval flight officer. Admiral Harris has commanded at every level, including Patrol Squadron 46, Patrol and Reconnaissance Wing 1, Joint Task Force Guantanamo, the U.S. 6th Fleet, and Striking and Support Forces NATO. We're very fortunate to have him as our chair of the Naval Institute Board of Directors. Let's give a very warm welcome to Admiral Harry Harris.
Thanks, Ray, and thanks for the shout out to the class of 78. All right. I'm not sure that what our record was for Herndon. I think we had 950 individual plans on how to get to the top, and it probably took us days. But there you go. All right. All right. So good afternoon, shipmates and friends, classmates, and fellow champions of sea power. It's a privilege for me to be with you this afternoon at this Jack C. Taylor Conference Center and to welcome all of our members and guests to the Naval Institute's 2025 annual meeting. The Institute is in great shape, and I'm proud to say we're now in our 152nd year, just a few years older than I am. That's a remarkable milestone for any organization, and it's a testament to the enduring relevance of our mission, the strength of our community, and the professionalism of the team that keeps this place running. Let me take a moment to recognize a few of the individuals that made that possible, and I'll ask you to raise your hands for each group that I mentioned so you can be acknowledged after I'm done. So first, to our board of directors and board of trustees who are here with us tonight, thank you for your leadership, your vision, and your steady hands at the helm. Please raise your hands. I also want to acknowledge the editorial board whose commitment to the intellectual rigor and peer review ensure that the Institute's voice remains bold, credible, and consequential. Please raise your hands if you're a member of the editorial board. And to the Naval Institute staff, your tireless work behind the scenes drives every magazine article, every book, every podcast episode, every panel discussion, and every news article, as well as every public forum. You are the engine that keeps this ship steaming ahead. Please raise your hand. I know many of you are in the audience. Thank you. And finally, a special word of thanks to 3 distinguished directors who are completing their 6-year terms on the board as of today. The Honorable Christine Fox, I can't see you if you're here. Admiral Mike Rogers, U.S. Navy retired. And Lieutenant General Bob Whaler Walsh, U.S. Marine Corps retired. That's some serious firepower rolling off the board. These board members oversaw, among many other things, a significant expansion of the Institute's reach and engagement. The strong response taken to meet the many challenges of continuing to operate successfully during the global pandemic, and a very ambitious and successful Jack C. Taylor Conference Center capital project that went from final design through bidding, construction, and successful startup during that period. Each of them has made lasting contributions to the Institute and to the nation, and they all leave the Institute in a much stronger position than when they started, and that's an amazing legacy for which they should be justifiably proud. I am proud to have served with them, and I ask you to please join me in a round of applause for their exceptional service. Now, let me shift gears for a moment. It's no exaggeration to say that we're living in consequential times, a period marked by volatility and competition on a global scale. The world is not getting safer. In fact, it's more dangerous than ever. In Europe, after Russia invaded Ukraine, and let me emphasize the noun, object, verb here. When Russia invaded Ukraine, the war continues to grind on with brutal intensity, reshaping NATO's posture and challenging the international order. In the Middle East, old fault lines are erupting in new ways, with non-state actors and proxy forces testing regional stability and threatening global commerce. Now we seem to be in a moment of optimism, and that's a good thing. But optimism and preparedness do not go hand in hand naturally. We must be ready for all outcomes. And in the Indo-Pacific, an increasingly assertive and modernized China is probing the limits of international law and regional resolve, and not just in the South China Sea, but across the Taiwan Strait, and the Yellow or West Sea, in the Indian Ocean, and even in the Arctic. China seeks hegemony in Asia and beyond. Meanwhile, the battlefield itself is evolving. We've seen the game-changing use of unmanned systems, loitering munitions, and precision strike weapons not just complement, but displace conventional doctrine. Hypersonic missiles, once the stuff of white papers and science fiction, are now in the field, altering the calculus of deterrence and response. Ladies and gentlemen, the world is in flux, and we must be prepared to meet it, not with naivete and wishful thinking, but with strategy, strength, and resolve. We're at an inflection point in history. In this moment, America needs clarity, and it needs candor, and that's precisely what the Naval Institute delivers. This organization, your organization, remains the nation's most important, independent, nonpartisan forum for debate, discussion, and forward thinking on naval and maritime affairs. No echo chambers, no groupthink, just open, honest dialogue informed by experience, anchored in facts, and driven by a shared commitment to understanding American sea power. Since concluding the American Sea Power Project, an effort that laid out a strong intellectual case for renewed investment in our Navy, the Institute has kept the momentum going. Through proceedings, through USNI News, through West and Defense Forum Washington, And through our expanding influence and influential podcast catalog, our Naval Institute has focused a critical spotlight on the shipbuilding crisis and fragility of our maritime industrial base. These are not abstract concerns, ladies and gentlemen. These are the very foundations of our ability to deter, to project power, and to prevail if deterrence fails, which is why it's encouraging and frankly long overdue that this new administration has made revitalizing shipbuilding and the defense industrial base a priority. You'll hear more of this from our distinguished panel of experts this afternoon, and I hope you'll lean forward, listen closely, and continue the conversation beyond this room. Because this isn't just a Navy issue, and it's not just a DoD issue. It's an American issue. In a world where coercion is replacing cooperation, where the maritime domain is contested daily, and where even alliances are being tested, the United States cannot afford a hollow fleet, a brittle industrial base, or a fractured understanding of the maritime domain. We need voices, we need ideas, and we need action. That's why the Naval Institute matters now more than ever. So this afternoon and this evening, I want to thank each and every one of you, members, supporters, writers, readers, listeners, and thinkers, for keeping this forum vibrant, relevant, and unafraid. Keep writing, keep challenging assumptions, keep showing up, because sea power is America's insurance policy, and it won't automatically renew itself. So thank you, and Ray, back to you.
Thank you, Admiral Harris. We'll start by taking care of some business. As you know, our Constitution and bylaws require that we come together at the annual meeting to essentially do two things. One is talk about the state of the Institute, and the other is to announce our election results. So we're going to do that in reverse order. We'll start with our election results for our board of directors. We elected 3 new board members. General Frank McKenzie, U.S. Marine Corps retired, former commander, U.S. Central Command. The Honorable Sean J. Stackley, former Acting Secretary of the Navy, former Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition, and former Corporate Vice President for Strategic Advanced Programs and Technology at L3 Harris. And Ms. Matisse Wright Springer, Senior Vice President and Partner at Booz Allen Hamilton. We re-elected 2 of our serving directors, Admiral Harry Harris and the Honorable Ellen Lord, former Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment. We also welcome our new chair of the editorial board of directors, Captain DeVere Crooks, U.S. Navy. And we welcome 2 new board liaisons, Navy Board Liaison Rear Admiral Bill Daly, Director of Surface Warfare, and Coast Guard Board Liaison Rear Admiral Mike Day, Acting Deputy Commandant for Mission Support. In addition to our 3 directors rolling off the board, we say farewell and thanks to Captain Tom Clarity, our previous chair of the editorial board, and we also thank our 2 departing board liaisons, Rear Admiral Adam Shami and Rear Admiral Fred Pyle. Next up is our editorial board. The editorial board is vital to the credibility of the open forum. Their active duty perspective from those wearing the uniform and in the game day in and day out provides us with invaluable peer review and course guidance for Proceedings Magazine. New members on the editorial board are highlighted in blue. There are several editorial board members rotating off the board, and we thank them for their incredible service. Members of the Ed Board do this amazing work above and beyond their day jobs in the Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard. And we thank them for their time, commitment, and invaluable insights. And finally, I acknowledge our Naval Institute Foundation Board of Trustees, who are not elected but appointed by our Board of Directors. We welcome 1 new member, Mr. John Majoris, to the Board of Trustees. Our trustees volunteer their time and energy, and we thank them for their steadfast support of the Institute. Now, the other reason that we gather for this annual meeting is to provide an update to our members and supporters. It's a chance to come together, to reflect on where we've been, and to look ahead to where we're going. For where we've been, I'm happy to report that our balance sheet for 2024 was strong and very much in the black due to a combination of superb performance across our operating lines, our foundation, and our investments. Now, last year we produced a short video to recap some of the major accomplishments of the Institute team. And it seemed to go over pretty well, so we thought we'd do it again this year. Only this time I have to warn you that I asked the team to kind of amp it up a bit, make it a little more interesting, liven things up, maybe throw some AI in there. So this is not going to be what you're expecting. I just want you to brace for that. To their credit, the team did an amazing job, and they did not disappoint me. At the very least, you will not be bored. That's all I will say. So I hope you learned something. I hope you're entertained, and I hope I still have a job after this.
If we simplify what energy security is, it's affordable, it's reliable, and it's sustainable. And wouldn't that be great if we could have all three? But you can't.
How many of the grads in here studied drones? I know I didn't. I don't think Peg did, but the midshipmen today have to. So the complexity of the problems require different experience levels, different kinds of leaders, different kind of people that may not all look like Tom Cruise.
Aston, smoking deck, shoes igniting, lessons to learn. Boots hit the deck, feel the bass in the air, spinning round, hands up, don't you ever care. The night is ours, the ship's the dance floor. Navy groove pounding through that ocean roar.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to start by thanking the Naval Institute. This paper was an opportunity to dare to read, think, speak, and write, which has been graciously supported by my mentors. I encourage all junior naval officers to embrace opportunities like the ones provided by the Naval Institute to continue to propel innovation in our profession of arms. Thank you.
Middle of another epochal change, and that is the dawn, and I do mean the dawn, of the information revolution. Who competes best in this? Who adapts better? Who's better able to combine data, computing power, AI, and who can win the first battle, likely in space, cyber, and the information domain shall prevail.
Last
year, I drove the creation of a government shipbuilders council. This united the Department of the Navy, MARAD, Coast Guard, NOAA, and yes, even the United States Army. I had to admit that the Army has ships, yes, or boats as I call them.
But the admirals got moved straight, blow your mind. Pirouette past cannons, moonwalking, Aston, smoking deck shoes, igniting lessons to learn. Boots hit the deck, feel the bass in the air, spinning round, hands up, don't you ever care. The night is ours, the ship's the dance floor. Navy groove pounding through that ocean roar. Rolling waves crash hard, the open sea rolls. White caps breaking to the beat of the soul. Steel hull cutting through the tide like a knife. Admiral dancing got the rhythm for life. Boots hit the deck, feel the bass in the air, spinning round, hands up, don't you ever care. The night is ours, the ship's the dance floor. Navy groove pounding through that ocean roar. Ship's engine hums, deeper thrumming, low grind. Sea salt bites, refined.
Enemy cruiser destroyed. Our team is taking the lead.
Even on the warpath, we know how to dance. Boots hit the deck, feel the bass in the air, spinning round, hands up, don't you ever care. The night is ours, the ship's the dance floor. Navy groove pounding through that ocean roar. Captain's too stiff, the crew can't unwind, but the admirals got moved straight, blow your mind. Pirouette past cannons, moonwalking, Aston, smoking deck shoes, igniting lessons to learn. Boots hit the deck, feel the bass in the air.
We're joined now by the former commander of U.S. forces in the Middle East, retired General Frank McKenzie. His new book, The Melting Point, is available this Tuesday.
Groove pounding through that ocean roar.
Before we begin, I would be grossly remiss if I did not give a nod to Jack C. Taylor, the man for whom this wonderful conference center was named. We simply cannot talk about the Battle of Leyte Gulf in the Jack C. Taylor Conference Center without understanding the great connection that Jack Taylor fought in that battle.
Boots hit the deck, feel the bass in the air, spinning round, hands up, don't you ever care. The night is ours, the ship's the dance floor. Navy groove pounding through that ocean roar. Ship's engine hums.
According to multiple national news outlets and the U.S. Naval Institute,
The U.S. Naval Institute said.
According to U.S. Naval Institute News.
According to the U.S. Naval Institute.
The U.S. Naval Institute reports for
years, the U.S. Naval Institute reporting.
Retired U.S. Navy Admiral Harry Harris is chairman of the U.S. Naval Institute.
But according to the U.S. Naval Institute, a 2024 article published by the U.S. Naval Institute.
According to USNI News.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit for the record a recent U.S. Naval Institute proceedings article entitled Aircraft Carriers Still Indispensable, written by Admiral Paparo, that provides an excellent summary of the case for aircraft carriers as a cornerstone for our national defense.
that ocean roar.
Okay, I told you it would be different. Who knew that was coming? And I was sitting next to my boss, and he didn't utter the words that I was afraid of hearing. So I hope you enjoyed that. Of course, not all the Institute's accomplishments over the past year can be conveyed in a 10-minute video, so I just want to highlight a few things. We have digitized a great portion of our content, 151 years worth of proceedings, 39 years worth of Naval History magazine, and we're in the final phase of digitizing 180,000 of our most important photos. Online traffic for proceedings and Naval History magazines and USNI News grew exponentially, millions of page views, as you saw, and over 18 billion impressions in 2024. Our Naval Institute Press published great new titles and began the business of creating digital textbooks. Our conference center exceeded their goal for bookings. We had several new and repeat customers, including the Chief of Naval Operations, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, and several others. We hosted the Naval Academy Stockdale Center's McCain Conference. You saw SecDef and SecState and their Australian counterparts in the video. We were very honored that they chose this site for their 2+2 meetings, and so many more. And of course, we host our own programs here at the Conference Center, like our annual meeting, our history conference with the Naval Academy, warfighter events for the midshipmen, where we bring community leaders in to talk to them about their future options, podcast, author events, and many more. Our most significant off-site conference is West 2024, which we do in San Diego every year. West 2024 broke attendance records. And West 2025, which we just did in January, raised the bar even higher. Our success is driven by a staff of dedicated professionals and members, donors and supporters who truly believe in the Institute's mission. So thank you to all of you. The Naval Institute team has continued to deliver high quality, highly relevant, and factual content during these especially challenging times, and I could not be more proud of this team. I would now like to ask the staff to please stand and be recognized for your truly amazing work. Thank you. 65 or so on the staff, and they do the work of many, many more. One more thing that I want to point out, and she's going to never like me ever again, but I want to recognize someone else. Each year, the Marine Corps League recognizes one woman who has contributed substantially to the morale, welfare, and well-being of Marines and the U.S. Marine Corps. The award is named for Dickie Chappelle, one of history's most fearless wartime journalists. This year, the Dickie Chappelle Award was presented to our stalwart USNI News journalist, Mallory Shelbourne. I won't make you stand up, but congratulations, Mallory. Please don't hate me. I also could not be more grateful for the support of our members, donors, authors, speakers, board members, and supporters who helped make all this great work possible over the past year. Now I want to briefly touch on the way ahead. Over the past year, we've invested significant time and energy into shaping our new strategic plan, one that builds on years of progress. For over 150 years, the U.S. Naval Institute has been rooted in history, tradition, and legacy, committed to providing a trusted, open, independent, nonpartisan forum for debate, professional development, and historical insight. But like the Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard we serve, we've entered into a new era, one that demands agility, innovation, and a bold vision for the future. We will remain who we've always been, while becoming something distinctly, powerfully new, anchored in our past with our sights set firmly on the future. The strategic plan we are developing compels us to expand our reach as the trusted voice in maritime thought leadership, globally and across the platforms where the next generation of maritime leaders convene. We will transform how people connect with the Institute by creating seamless, digital-first experiences tailored for every engagement. We will invest in future-ready tools and talent to empower our mission and increase our impact. We also aim to broaden public understanding of why sea power matters today and into the future. This is about more than just continuing to produce quality content. It's about enabling the conversation, broadening the connection, and helping to cultivate the next generation of maritime leaders. Look for our plan to be posted soon. This concludes my CEO update. Thank you very much for your attention and your support. I now invite Captain Bill Hamlet, U.S. Navy retired, our superb editor-in-chief of Proceedings magazine, to the stage to kick off our author award presentations.
Who knew Civil War admirals had such moves? So good afternoon. I'm very pleased to announce several award winners today, starting with the winners of 2 of our essay contests. The Naval Institute has been running essay contests since 1879. We have about a dozen contests annually. A great deal of Proceedings content comes from our essay contests because we publish not only the top 3 winners of each contest, but we evaluate every submission for publication, whether it wins or not. All our essay contests are judged in the blind. We don't know who the authors are until the screening and judging are done, which makes our contests true meritocracies. The first winners to be recognized today are from the Leadership Essay Contest, sponsored by the Doctors Jack and Jennifer London Charitable Fund. This contest is open to any officer in the Navy, Marine Corps, or Coast Guard from 01 to 04. This year, we received 47 entries for this contest. And the third prize winner is Lieutenant Logan Barber, U.S. Navy Reserve. His article is titled, "Invest in People, Not Perfection." It will appear in the July issue of Proceedings.
Greetings, United States Naval Institute from Washington, D.C. It is a great honor to receive an award for my leadership essay, "Invest in People, Not Perfection." This essay was inspired by my first steps into the fleet as a young junior officer, steps where I saw firsthand how trust, mentorship, and dignity can transform a command. Captain Stephen Foley and Commander Thad Tasso didn't just lead with competence. They led with care, dignity, and respect. Their example taught me that emotional intelligence isn't a buzzword. It is how you build resilient sailors, strong teams, and commands that people actually want to serve it. You don't get that through fear. You get that through a belief that your people can be more than they ever thought they could be. So thank you to the United States Naval Institute for creating a platform where we can share these kinds of stories, the stories that matter. I hope mine encourages future leaders to take that risk, to trust their people even when it's hard.
This year's second prize winner is Navy Lieutenant Leah Gordon. Her article is titled "Building Resilience," which offers lessons from a recent CB deployment to the nation of Georgia. I'll point out that Lieutenant Gordon also won the capstone essay contest for midshipmen back when she was a Naval Academy first-class midshipman in 2020. She's here with us tonight, and she pre-recorded her remarks.
Good evening, I'm Lieutenant Leah Gordon. I stand here in front of one of the many job sites we have at Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton. We're a brilliant team of civilians and military work 24/7 to provide engineering expertise to over 70,000 Marines, sailors, and their families. I wrote Building Resiliency to commemorate the Seabees and our deployment to Georgia, where they taught me what it means to truly be a leader in an adverse environment and when we are alone and unafraid. They were the ones that made that deployment a success and truly embodied the can-do attitude of our community. Thank you. I'm truly humbled to have placed second in this contest. I want to shout out the civilians, military, and CVs currently deployed, prepping the battle space for our next conflict. We build, we fight. Thank you for your time.
And this year's Leadership Essay Contest winner is Lieutenant J.G. Ezra Haddock, U.S. Navy. His article, Division Officers Can Conquer Cluelessness, was published in the May proceedings. Lieutenant Haddock was one of our midshipman summer interns back in 2019. Unfortunately, he could not be here tonight, but he recorded his remarks. I apologize, he could not record his remarks. Sorry about that. All right, now it's my pleasure to introduce the winners of the 2024 General Prize Essay Contest. Since 1879, this has been the Naval Institute's flagship essay contest. The list of past winners reads like a who's who of famous naval thought leaders. Then Commander Alfred Thayer Mahan took honorable mention in this contest in its first year. Other winners over the years include notable sea service leaders, many writing long before they achieved their highest rank and fame. Rear Admiral Stephen B. Luce, Lieutenant Ernest J. King, Lieutenant Ned Beach, Lieutenant Commander and later Senator Sam Stratton, Captain Wayne Hughes, Lieutenant Commander Jim Stavridis, Commander Sandy Winnefeld, just to name a few. The General Prize Essay Contest is funded by Andrew and Barbara Taylor of the Taylor family, Jack C. Taylor, and we thank them for their proud and enduring sponsorship. This year, we received 180 essays contest submissions for this contest, setting a new record. All three winning essays are thought-provoking, and they bear directly on the challenges facing today's sea services. We published all three in the March issue of Proceedings. The third prize winner was Navy Commander William R. Nest. Will's been writing for Proceedings since he was an ensign, and his essay, Fix the Navy's Expeditionary Repair, addresses the need for more and better wartime repair capacity in the Indo-Pacific. He receives a medal, $2,000, and a one-year membership in the Naval Institute. Commander R. Nest is not here tonight, but he recorded his remarks.
Good afternoon. I'm very sorry that I couldn't be there today. I'm incredibly honored to receive third prize in this year's General Prize Essay Contest, and I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Megan Foster, Deanne Dominguez, and Rear Admiral Robert Dodson for their collaboration and feedback, especially Admiral Dodson. This idea grew out of an operational art research paper at the Naval War College, which came right on the heels of a tour on USS Santa Fe undergoing engineered overhaul. That shipyard experience crystallized in my mind the ability to conduct expeditionary maintenance and repair as a critical force multiplier. My last tour in OpNav opened my eyes to some of the difficulties that the repair vector faces versus other vectors within contested logistics, especially with regard to resourcing. The essay offers a conceptual framework for triaging repairs based on time to regaining mission capability and calls for stronger advocacy and resource sponsorship, as well as investments in expeditionary maintenance and repair facilities. It also recommends exploring new authorities granted under the most recent National Defense Authorization Act regarding the conduct of expeditionary maintenance on non-forward deployed ships. Clear written communication is the currency of the realm in our profession, from books and articles to emails and CASREPs and other naval messages, and is a skill that requires practice. I would wholeheartedly encourage anyone out there with an original idea, a topic they are passionate about, or both, to commit that to writing and submit it for publication, preferably to the Naval Institute. Thank you.
This year's second prize winner is Lieutenant Colonel Joel Ray, U.S. Marine Corps. His article, A Forward Denial Defense Inside the First Island Chain, looks at ways U.S. and allied naval forces can push back against China's aggressive tactics in the South China Sea. Colonel Ray receives a medal, a check for $3,000, and a one-year extension to his membership in the Naval Institute. He could not be with us tonight, but he recorded his remarks.
Good evening to the U.S. Naval Institute. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Joel Ray. and I regret that I will not be able to be with you in person this evening. I am, however, grateful and excited that I get to discuss this essay of forward denial defense inside the first island chain. I wrote this essay because I believe that the U.S. Naval Services, working in concert with our allies and partners, can stop further PRC expansion in the South China Sea and the first island chain. The PRC, using the PLAN, has expanded throughout this region for 5 decades using a critical capability, namely the maritime militia. This maritime militia operates in the gray zone, and it doesn't follow the rules of conventional naval forces. It is difficult to detect and very difficult to stop, because by the time you detect it, by the time you know it's there, the operation has already occurred and it's a fait accompli. If we task organize correctly with the U.S. Marine Corps, the U.S. Coast Guard, the U.S. Navy, and our allies and partners working together, we can stop this capability. We can remove it from the board, and by removing it from the board, we can prevent further expansion of the PRC in our allies' sovereign territory. Thank you.
The first place winner of this year's General Prize Essay Contest is a junior officer who has already published 5 proceedings articles, Lieutenant J.G. Nicholas Danby. His article, Less is More, the United States Must Stop Stretching Its Navy Thin, calls for a resource-efficient approach to thwarting China while upholding credible deterrence. Lieutenant Danby receives a gold medal, a check for $6,000, and a 1-year membership in the Naval Institute. Please welcome Lieutenant Danby to the stage.
Well, thank you, Captain Hamlet, for the introduction. I'm heartened to learn that Captain Mahan only received honorable mention, so it's onward and upward from here. I came up with this article idea back in October 2023. I was in the first island chain on board USS Ronald Reagan, an aircraft carrier, as part of strike group staff. And I began writing the article in the wee hours of the morning on the carrier, 2 a.m. Battle lanterns were on, very eerily quiet P-ways. And I couldn't finish the essay because I kept on getting interrupted at 3 a.m., 3:30. There was always some sort of crisis du jour. And perhaps it's fitting that the piece that I wrote goes to that issue, which is how much the Navy does every day, and yet more and more, as a request comes in, we have less and less to do it with. It's something we faced tremendous challenges out in the Pacific in 7th Fleet and in Pac Fleet. We seek to go toe-to-toe with the Chinese Navy, and yet we are outnumbered, both by patrols and tonnage and warships, but we also face tyrannies of distance, competing priorities and numbers. At the same time that we're doing all these exercises with allies and trainings and readiness requirements, we are also doing off-the-cuff deployments to the Middle East as well, as some of our Pacific units get sortied elsewhere. And so, by having and behaving as though we wield limitless resources, my article's argument is that the United States has lost sight of what matters most in the Indo-Pacific, which is solidifying deterrence, sharpening our warfighting skills, reshaping the strategic landscape to counter China's momentum, and working with our allies. And so by being overcommitted and constantly having to source all these requirements, we are now unprepared to meet and defeat the China challenge. And I somewhat provocatively, according to my superiors, argue that this is playing into Beijing's hands. So how do we solve this problem? Well, you have to read the article. But I don't want to spoil the surprise. And I want to get my numbers up too. But I do want to add, and in conclusion say, the U.S. Navy faces a great many challenges in the coming years, but despite the realistic tone of my article, I am perpetually optimistic. And one of those reasons is because there is no Naval Institute and proceedings in the Chinese Navy or the Russian Navy. And I'm not pandering. What I mean by that is this is a great opportunity for every service member, the lowest rank, including myself when I started out, to the highest rank of all designators and backgrounds and experiences to read and think and write and speak and discuss. I've discussed a great many Naval Institute proceeding articles on the carrier, in the Pentagon, at OCS. And so it does play a profound role. And I think as I transition to the reserves and become a part of that reserve personnel force, the Naval Institute also contributes to a reserve of ideas that we can pull upon whenever we need to change tack or change course. And so I'm incredibly grateful to Captain Hamlet, the USNI team, for being here tonight, but for continuing to further that mission and continuing to hold essay contests, which Captain Mahan could not win. But thank you very much.
Now it's my honor to introduce the 2024 Proceedings Author of the Year, Lieutenant Jong Soo Gary Kim, U.S. Navy Reserve. A Civil Engineer Corps officer, Gary has been a consistent contributor to proceedings for the past 4 years, and in 2024 we published his work 3 times, including an important shipbuilding article in September titled "The Case for a Fifth Naval Shipyard." He has another article coming in the June issue on shipbuilding lessons from Japan and South Korea. Lieutenant Kim is a student at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, working simultaneously, because he's not a slacker, on both his MBA and a master's degree in East Asian Studies. He previously served with the Seabees of Naval Mobile Construction Battalion 5 and with Naval Facilities Engineering Systems Command in Sasebo, Japan. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for the 2024 Proceedings Author of the Year, Lieutenant Gary Kim.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here in Annapolis. This is only my second time here. And first of all, I'd like to thank the Naval Institute for fishing me out of Gulfport early from my 2-week drill. So my regiment was actually doing a CV version of a COM2X. And I got pulled 2 days early to come up here. My unit was happy to help, and I was happy to fly up here and not have to stand the watch floor. That being said, it seems like there's much discussion on what I have written, but I do want to discuss what I am writing right now. Shipbuilding is definitely probably the largest issue that the Navy faces today, and likely in the medium to long term, in the 10 to 15 year. And in that space, I do think labor issues and the ability to motivate a critically large amount of our citizens to work in heavy industry and shipbuilding is likely the most pressing and the most urgent issue we need to solve. And this, I think, spans multiple issues. For example, I was driving through Gulfport and I saw a Buc-ee's advertisement for jobs, and they were paying $21, starting from $21 to build sandwiches at Buc-ee's. Can anyone take a guess how much being a experienced welder at Ingalls in Pascagoula pays? Okay, not quite that bad, sir, but it's $23. You have to go build destroyers for only $2 more than building sandwiches in Buc-ee's. And issues like these are, pressing across the entire Navy. And as I am now not in active service and I'm going to business school, these issues come up to my mind. And right now, the article I'm writing on is, hey, what are the things we could do today and 3 and 5 and 10 years from now to make our shipbuilding industry competitive? And the ideas right now that are flowing consist of, hey, we need to automate the shipyards. We can't have shipbuilders anymore. We need to have shipbuilders who manage robots that build ships. That's how you get people to pay people more to build ships and can actually make a profit of making ships. We need to invest to make sure that shipyards are near metro areas where people want to live. We have yards in Marinette, Wisconsin, Bath, Maine. I was recently talking to a reservist chief who works at Bath, and he says it's impossible to hire people out of a metro area of 40,000 people or 100,000 people. We need large shipyards in large metro areas where we could pull labor. We also need to think about, hey, what other adjacent industries can we pull labor from? I'm going to take, for example, in Korea, whenever the shipbuilding industry slows down, all the steel workers go build apartments up in Seoul. And when the shipbuilding industry comes back, they all move back down to Busan to build ships. It's like things like this that we have to analyze. And we do have a generational ability to rebuild the industry. And let's do it right this time and let's never let it go. And finally, we'd like to recognize my girlfriend Hajin that's here. She got a day off work to come with me today. She's been with me since 2021. She said yes to go on a date with the young ensign in NSB 5 in LA, and then she stuck with me since then. So, hope you stick with me further. And yep, and thank you for the support. And one last thing, I swear, this is my save round. I brought a U.S. Naval Academy 2019 grad with me, Lieutenant Eddie Zhang. He is a CB dive officer. He's laid concrete underwater. He works at the shipyard optimization program, so he knows way more about how to rebuild shipyards than I do. So please don't give me questions, please give him questions. So thank you very much.
Previews of coming attractions. Our next recognition event will be in September to present the Commander Dudley Knox Naval History Lifetime Achievement Award for Naval Historians. You can check our website for upcoming details and opportunities to write and to support the good writing that people like we've honored today have been putting out in proceedings and in naval history. I'm going to be followed by my esteemed colleague, Eric Mills, the editor-in-chief of Naval History magazine.
Thank you, Captain. Well, it's my great pleasure to introduce our author of the year, a name well known to this audience, Edward J. Maralda. Ed, as you know, is the author and editor of numerous acclaimed books. He's a field historian with the Institute's Oral History program, and he's been a steady and highly regarded contributor to naval history for a number of years. His award recognizes the memorable pair of features he authored for us in 2024. The first, Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape, told the remarkable story of Navy Lieutenant Charles Klusman, who was shot down over Laos in 1964. He became a POW. He managed to escape, and he endured a harrowing jungle trek to freedom. Ed's second 2024 feature, A Study in Contrast, offered an insightful look at Admirals Zumwalt and Holloway, the CNOs of the 1970s, who brought wildly divergent leadership styles to navigating the rocky shoals of the post-Vietnam era. So please join me in a richly deserved round of applause for Ed Maralda, Naval History Author of the Year.
Thank you, Eric, for that kind introduction. John Warden is a historical figure, of course. He's made it to the digital age. I have not. I'm a historical figure as well. My remarks are audio. I have no recorded remarks. I would like to say that I'm truly honored that the U.S. Naval Institute has chosen me as Author of the Year for 2024. The Naval History magazine and I have shared a long and positive connection. In fact, the inaugural issue of Naval History, which appeared in April of 1987, that's in the last century, carried an article of mine that focused on the Navy's riverine experience in Vietnam. I especially want to thank Eric Mills and Richard Latour and their predecessors at the helm of the Naval History magazine for their willingness to consider sometimes unsolicited topics for publication, such as the two pieces that Eric mentioned came out in 2024. Many of you probably know of the shoot-down and imprisonment in the Hanoi Hilton of Lieutenant J.G. Everett Alvarez. But my first article in 2024 related to the little-known but fascinating story of Charles Klusman. He was shot down in 1964 before the war really got off to a big start. As Eric mentioned, he was shot down in Laos, was imprisoned for like a month or more, and made his way to safety through the jungles of Laos. He was one of only 2 naval aviators to escape captivity during the entire war. The other article that Eric mentioned that he agreed to take on board, I thought would be a bit more controversial. I contrasted the leadership styles of 2 Vietnam-era chiefs of naval operations, Admiral Elmo R. Zumwalt Jr. and James L. Holloway III. I doubt that few here today aren't aware of Admiral Zumwalt's towering reputation in the modern history of the U.S. Navy. His command performance in Vietnam, his actions to improve the lot of minority sailors, and his bushy eyebrows, that he always stood out, and he had a mullet as well. But I argued that Holloway was more effective as Chief of Naval Operations. In my view, his term provided a strong foundation for the 600-ship Navy and the maritime strategy of the 1980s. The point I'm making here today is that the U.S. Naval Institute in general and the Naval History magazine in particular have consistently welcomed honest debate and respect for intellectual integrity. Again, my thanks to Rear Admiral Spicer and the staff of the U.S. Naval Institute and the membership of the U.S. Naval Institute. Thank you.
My name's Adam Kane. I'm the Naval Institute Press Director, and I have the honor of presenting the evening's last award, our Naval Institute Press Author of the Year. This year's winner is Dr. Nicholas A. Lambert for his book, The Neptune Factor, Alfred Thayer Mahan and the Concept of Sea Power. A naval historian and leading authority on strategic implications of globalization, Nick reminds us that Mahan's concept of sea power is more important than ever in today's in a world shaped by globalization, technology, and strategic uncertainty today. Nick, I'd welcome you to the stage.
First of all, thank you very much. You want me to stand at the podium? All right. Yeah. But I know it's designed that I can do it. The room is designed. Adam, Ray Spicer, thank you very much for this award, and to anybody else who was involved in the selection. I would also like to particularly thank Pete Daly, who I'm sure is out there somewhere. Where? There you are. It was Pete's idea. It was Pete who persuaded me that I should publish with Naval Institute Press, and there's no question about it, it was the right decision. The quality of the book is superb. The production quality of the book, I should say. It's better than the, I don't make any claims of what goes in between. That ChatGPT isn't that good. But it's better than the Harvard University Press, it's better than Oxford University Press. And you will remember in writing that book, our hope was to start getting the Navy and the rest of the country talking about sea power again, and hopefully thinking about sea power again. Now, I don't know whether or not there is a glimmer of hope that it's beginning to happen. Let's hope it is, but I also rather hope that I'm afraid that the country is going to roll over, press the snooze button and ask for an extra 5 minutes. Let's hope it doesn't happen. If I could make one point, it is that sea power is much more than about warfighters and warfighting. As Mahan thought, these were the easy bits. The subject also requires deep study on international economics, awareness of commercial flows, and day-to-day business practices. Not exactly fun stuff. It also requires command of context and great precision in thought and in argument. It isn't as easy as it looks. But if you are a student or a serious student of CPAR, then by all means continue to read Julian Corbett, and that'll earn you your master's. But if you want to go for your doctorate, go back to the master, Alfred Thayer Mahan. Now, he may not offer a playbook for the 21st century. Too much has changed in the last 100 years. But he remains still the best point of departure for thinking about CPAR. Thank you.
That concludes our awards presentation for this evening. One last round of applause for all of our award winners. Congratulations to everyone. It is now my honor to introduce our panel, Correcting Course, Revitalizing the Shipbuilding Industry to Meet Strategic Demands. And I would like to invite our distinguished speakers to join me on stage. And I ask that Rear Admiral Matt Klunder, Vice President of Navy and Marine Corps Accounts and DoD Labs at L3 Harris Technologies, also join me on stage to introduce our panel and moderator. We are looking forward to this timely and important conversation with leaders who will share their insights on how we arrived at this critical inflection point, the urgent need to revitalize the maritime industrial base and its workforce, and what must be done to preserve the strength and resilience of the United States as a maritime nation. Over to you, Admiral Klunder. Thank you.
A lot of great familiar faces here. Thank you, Adam. L3 Harris is certainly always has felt honored to be a strong supporter of the U.S. Naval Institute and a key partner within our critical maritime industrial base. This topic is tremendously important, and I am honored to introduce the moderator of this panel, the Honorable Sean Stackley. He's the former Acting Secretary of the Navy and former Senior Vice President of Strategy, Growth, and Technology at L3 Harris Technologies, where he oversaw growth strategies intended to synchronize the company's technology investments for the pursuit, planning, mergers, and acquisition efforts. Before stepping in as the Acting Secretary of the Navy, he served as the Assistant Secretary of Research, Development, and Acquisition for more than 8 years. Oh, by the way, if you didn't realize it, Sean was my boss both in uniform and in my suit. His 4-decade career also includes time as a professional staff member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, where he reviewed Navy and Marine Corps programs. As a Navy Surface Warfare Officer, I know he wants me to speed this up. Mr. Stackley served aboard the USS John Young, DD-973, as the program manager for LPD-17, the production officer for USS Arleigh Burke, DDG-51, and the project naval architect for the Canadian frigate HMCS Halifax. Oh yes, I would be remiss if I didn't highlight that Sean is a huge Naval Academy and Boston Red Sox fan. So over to you if you want to ask him any baseball questions as well. By the way, I think they're in second place right now behind the dreaded Yankees. It's okay.
We all have our crosses to bear. Thank you, Matt.
Congrats, Sean.
All right. Well, thank you. Hey, I've been looking forward to this. This is a great panel, an incredibly important topic. And I'm going to do quick introductions. And this panel needs no introduction. You know, to my left here, Admiral John Richardson, 31st CNO of the Navy. Prior to that, Stockdale Award winner on the Honolulu, ComSub 4, Naval Reactors, and a tremendous shipmate partner. We worked across the hall from each other, and today advisor and many boards with industry and supporting the government. Vice Admiral Jim Downey, ComNav-C, a surface warfare engineering duty officer, started his career in information warfare, information systems, quickly grew into program management, CVNX, CGX, DDG 1000 program manager, PEO carriers. He was also Naval Regional Maintenance Center, and today he owns all the functions coast to coast and international for the Navy Naval Sea Systems Command. And one of his predecessors, ComNav-C, Vice Admiral retired Tom Moore. Tom, nuclear surface warfare, spent about a third of his career at sea on nukes, and then shifted over to engineering duty and waterfront at Newport News, the ins and outs of carriers and submarines, and then rapidly moved into carrier program management, where we first met when you were delivering the George H.W. Bush, and then on to be the ship maintenance N-43B as a sponsor, and then back in the Navy Yard as PEO carriers, then ultimately ComNevC, and today he's government relations at HII. And Mr. Marty Bollinger, who spent 30 years as an A&D consultant at Booz Allen Hamilton, working a lot of the issues that we've been working with side by side, government and industry, and also a senior executive lecturer at Darden, lecturing, basically training and educating a lot of our flags and senior executives that are running the Navy today. And a noted author, several books published by the Naval Institute, and countless articles on the matter. In fact, he's written a very important article in this past proceedings on shipbuilding. So if you all please take a seat and let's enjoy the next hour together here. I thought I'm going to kick this off a little bit with some important history that we'll just say it sets the stage here. So 20 years ago, after a hiatus in submarine construction, Newport News was in the throes of overcoming challenges delivering its first of class Virginia submarine, the USS Texas. And at the other end of the shipyard at that time, with the Nimitz-class carrier procurement having been stretched to 5-year centers, the last of the class, George H.W. Bush, was getting ready to launch, dealing with a lot of challenges associated with green labor that had basically grown in the shipyard as a result of stretching the carrier schedules. Meanwhile, in the fabrication buildings, after a gap in carrier procurement due to requirements churn and really a battle over transformation in the Pentagon, the new first-of-class aircraft carrier, Gerald R. Ford, had just started construction. So it was at that time, 20 years ago, when the Navy was at its smallest size since World War I, that the Department of Defense submitted a budget request with just 4 ships included. The Congressional Research Service branded the budget request as a shipwreck. Meanwhile, Congress, failing to pass an appropriation, was informed by the Navy that absent an anomaly to allow the Carl Vinson to start its refueling complex overhaul, that Newport News would have to lay off thousands of skilled workers, the ship's schedule would slip more than day for day, and the RCOH cost would increase prohibitively. So these events are crystal clear in my mind because I had just gone to work for Senator John Warner, and he was then chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, who would use the weight of his position to first and foremost get that anomaly passed. That was now. And while he went about increasing the Navy's shipbuilding budget that year, and he passed legislation that required the Navy to maintain a 12-carrier battle force, and he would then authorize 3 carriers to be procured on 4-year centers. It was all in keeping with Congress's responsibility to provide and maintain a Navy. And he wrapped it up and believed that we're in good water now. Well, a couple weeks later, the 2007 budget request was submitted to the Hill, and the battle began anew. And Proceedings magazine sounded the alarm with an article titled, "American Shipbuilding, an Industry in Crisis." Now, in the article, a young president of Newport News Shipbuilding, Mike Petters, elegantly described the commitment required by both government and industry in order to maintain a vibrant, healthy shipbuilding industry and to ensure our Navy didn't suffer the fate of our closest allies who had taken a pause in shipbuilding in years past. Now, from my perspective, having spent my career in uniform in shipbuilding and my time on the Hill with Sea Power Subcommittee, Mike nailed it. Mike nailed it. Now, we didn't know each other well at that point in time, but I took that article, put it in my playbook for the rest of my time on the Hill, and more importantly, from my time at RDA. From industry, a solid design, a viable, resilient supply chain, a skilled workforce, and the willingness and ability to invest in a healthy infrastructure. From the government, stability, all caps, stability, stable requirements, a stable budget, a reliable shipbuilding plan, continuous production, and adequate incentives to attract capital investment. And from both, discipline, particularly as it relates to contract changes, cost and schedule realism, and partnership. And Mike, he was the epitome, the model of partnership between government and industry. Too often, he wrote, it seems that the question being answered today is, what can we afford? Not, what do we need to ensure a Navy's security and freedom of the seas? And too seldom is the question asked, how do we ensure that American shipbuilding will be sounded sound 20 years from now? Well, here we are at the proverbial 20 years from now, and the alarm has sounded once again. Shipbuilding has been declared a national priority, which for a maritime nation, that goes without saying. Now, we didn't arrive at this position quickly. We're not going to emerge quickly, but borrowing from Winston Churchill, to never let a good crisis go to waste, at this point in time, with the resources and priority and the weight of the offices of the White House, the Pentagon, the Hill, and the executive offices in industry, we have to leverage the opportunity, capture the lessons, identify the needed changes, untap the innovation, and pound away ceaselessly until this Navy ship is righted. Now, what do we need to pound away on? So to be clear, shipbuilding is the means to an end, where national security is the end itself. So I'm going to start with Admiral Richardson, and with a clear eye on the rise of China's Navy. I would like you to set the stage for the discussion by tackling that most fundamental question that's been passed from CNO to CNO since Ernest King: what size Navy does the nation need? And to be clear, which you know best, this is not a matter of a ship count. So I'd like you to elevate the discussion in terms of the naval power that the nation needs, and then gives you a sense of strengths and weaknesses and gaps that you see, and the urgency and priority that you place on closing those gaps.
Yeah. Well, first, Sean, how do you expect me to follow that opening salvo you just gave? I mean, that was just like mic drop right there. And so, but I'll do my very best. And even before I get going on that, I just want to give the moderator and, in fact, the entire audience your last chance to substitute Lieutenant Kim for me, right? Because I think he could probably articulate shipbuilding as good as anybody in this room. I thought that was a terrific talk he gave, so I look forward to your article. And then I'd like to riff off of Professor Lambert's talk a little bit to answer your question, because we sort of confronted this, you know, when we were working together in the Pentagon, and we commissioned sort of a meta study, if you will, where we asked just about everybody who we thought had credibility in terms of exploring the question, exactly as you posed it. What is the Navy that the nation needs, right? The Navy to meet the responsibilities that are required by the United States as a maritime nation. And we could go on for the entire hour about what that means, but we farmed that question out to a number of think tanks, to individual navalists. We took, you know, the OPNAV staff took a stab at that. And, you know, there was an initial drive to sort of like, you know, the team came up to me and said, hey, we got to make sure we've got agents in every one of these places so that we get the answer we want. I said, no, I really want to see what the answers are. And everybody, you know, as you can imagine, had a little bit of a different take on it. But the idea came back of this concept of naval power, and it did kind of converge on a number of ships, right? I mean, this size of the Navy, the ship count is, you know, you can't live with it and you can't live without it, right? Because a number of the efforts sort of start with that. But we did start to express this idea. The number at that time came back, and we sort of averaged, if you will, all of the responses. We came up with that number, 355 ships at the time. And, you know, of course, there's a lot of information and details in the composition of that force. But, you know, and that number sort of was compelling enough that it became law. And so off we were. But as you said, you know, what sort of things went into that? And as Professor Lambert said, it's much more than just the warfighting element of it, right? And in fact, we want to be deterring warfighting. We want to be out there to do that sufficiently so that we never really have to get into a fight, so that every time Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin or whoever wants to take us on looks out over the South China Sea or wherever, they say, you know, it's not going to happen today because it won't turn out well for us. So that's just sort of the warfighting dimension. But there is, as he intimated, there's also sort of an economic dimension. And this goes back to sort of the fundamental ideas of Mahan, which is, about the time that he was writing and struggling to win the Naval Institute essay contest. That was about the time that the United States was moving beyond its shores, right? We had sort of achieved our limits of prosperity and influence, and now we had to go overseas, right? We had to become a global nation and get access to global markets, and therefore that required a global navy that could secure all of those trade routes and access to those markets, and that required global thinking and global strategy. So around this time, the Naval War College got stood up. Around this time, the Naval Postgraduate School got stood up to address these challenges. So it's multidimensional, as he said. It's warfighting, it's economic, it's diplomatic. That's why sometimes, I got to confess, I sort of cringe a little bit when we reduce calling sailors warfighters, right? Because I think that to call one of our people a U.S. Navy sailor, it absolutely includes being a premier maritime warfighter, the premier maritime warfighter in the world, but so much more, right? You are an ambassador, you are to a degree an economist. So at the time, 355 ships was the number that was put forward, and that allowed us to at least to focus our thinking. But again, that's just the start of it, right? So, what about the crews that are going to operate those 355 ships? What about the shipbuilding capacity that's going to be required to build the 355 ships? The pier space, right? The operational concepts, the systems that we're going to need to put on those ships to make them combat effective. Now you would talk about the software and the coding that would be downloaded onto those ships to increase the Navy's power to execute all of those missions even while deployed, and we can talk a little bit about that maybe later on. But the shipbuilding part is just the start of it, and as we said, it's kind of the easier part. It's the rest of it that has to come to be accounted for as well. And so now I think because of the world situation, the number would be greater than 355. I think that the delivering naval power, combat power, economic power, diplomatic power, all of those things is going to count on systems that can deliver systems and software in addition to hulls. And then, of course, there's the people. But I've got to say, though, that, and then I'll close. It's all sort of a little bit of a discussion about almost like how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, right? Because while we were having this discussion of 355, there's sort of this temptation to get into an academic discussion. Well, is it 355 or 357, or is it 360, or whatever it might be? And the answer, I was happy to let that discussion go on. But in the meantime, we were at like 275 ships at the time. So let's start building, right? Okay, I got it. We might be off by 10. We may be even by off, But let's start building, because we're way shy of where we need to be. And I think that kind of question leads us to this emphasis on shipbuilding right now, a fundamental part of being a maritime nation.
Yeah, it was Admiral Mullen walked over that four-ship budget caused Admiral Mullen to have to come over and explain what's going on with Navy shipbuilding. Yeah. And he created the 308 ship plan, which became the 313 ship plan, which became the 355 ship plan, which today is 381 ships. But in all cases, when you're at 295 today, the vector is pointing in the same direction. We need a larger Navy to provide for security. And I'm going to shift over a little bit here to some history. That going from the 600-ship Navy to the 295 today, there were a lot of changes that occurred. Some of them reversible, some of those irreversible. So Tom, your article in the February proceedings touched on a little bit of that history. Go ahead and plumb a little bit deeper into just the past 30 years, into the key turning points, and then maybe touch on which of those are reversible versus, hey, we have to keep going the direction we're going.
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. I think you did actually a pretty good job of summarizing the up front a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about now, and I'm going to kind of dive into a little bit more detail. And I spent probably the last 25 years of my career doing shipbuilding, and the question I would get all the time is, hey, how come you can't build more ships? Why are we stuck below 300? And with all due respect to the lieutenant there, a lot of the people tell me today, well, you don't have enough shipyards. That's the problem. We need more shipyards because we don't have the capacity. And I think you have to go back and look at where we came from to understand what the problem is today. And so if you go back into the end of the Reagan buildup between 1981 and the mid-90s, we built 5 aircraft carriers in 17 years. That's from laying the keel on CVN-71 to delivery of 75, Terry S. Truman. We'll build 4 carriers in the next 28 years. During that same time period, Electric Boat delivered 18 Ohio-class submarines in 18 years, 1 per year. And then we're going to go 33 years between building our next ballistic missile submarine. Electric Boat and Newport News together built 59 Los Angeles submarines in 14 years, 4.2 per year, and we're struggling now to get anywhere near 2 per year. And then we built 61 DDG-51s in about a 12-year period between Bath and Ingalls, each yard delivering about 2.5 per year. And then over the next 10 years, we ordered 11 ships. So when we talk about capacity, I think what you saw is that the shipyards had the physical capacity exist to build the force that we need. So and in fact, in many cases, the shipyards today are more modern than they were back in the 80s. What's changed is the workforce, and that was brought on by decisions that were made by the government. Between 1993 and 2010, we averaged ordering 5.5 ships per year. And between 1993 and 2027, I picked that length of time because that's the life cycle of a DDG-51, we'll have ordered 269 ships. So when people say to me, well, why can't you get to 313? I say, well, we only ordered 269 ships, so do the math, you're not going to get there. So what happened between 1993 and 2010 is industry behaved rationally. They started downsizing because the demand was not there. And the interesting thing about it is if you go look at it in a little bit more detail, it's up until about 2010, the productivity levels of the shipyards was better than it had ever been. And people would say, well, how is that possible? Because you were downsizing. And it's interesting how the shipyards work. They work on a last in, first out basis. So most of the layoffs occurred with the junior folks in the shipyard. So for a period of time, the experience level of the shipyards started to become better. And so they became more productive. And then around 2010, 2012, I've studied this. I've tried to figure out exactly kind of where that inflection point was. You started to see retirement of some of the older shipyard workers. And that happened just about the time that we realized, hey, we need to ramp up to 2 Virginia class per year. We need to start building more DDGs. And so the problem was the workforce did not exist in order to do that. And so while the physical capacity exists in the shipyards today, we don't have the manpower that we need. And that has been proven to be exceedingly challenging to get the workforce that we need. I like the Buc-ee's comment there. By the way, I'm a huge Buc-ee's fan, so if you haven't been to a Buc-ee's, you got to check it out. But that is part of the problem. The welders, get paid only about $2 more. There's an interesting statistic. In 1993, the average electrician supervisor at Newport News and Ingalls had been in that shipyard for 23 years. Today, the average supervisor in the shipyards has been their electrical supervisor, has been about 4.5 years. So not only do you not have not only do you have a green workforce, you have a green supervision. And so that's been a real problem. Now, this is a national issue. This is not just a shipbuilding issue. Shipbuilding is kind of a microcosm of where the country is. I think, over the last 20, 25 years, we took our eye off the ball and blue-collar manufacturing became less in vogue. Everybody had to get a college degree. And, Spanish medieval literature is I don't know what you do with that, but we took people away from those core things. And you can go look at Boeing, you can go look at Intel, you can go look at General Electric. This is a nationwide issue that we've got to solve. And we're not going to fix it overnight. Now, I think in the last couple of years, you've seen industry and the government together start to address that. Some of the maritime and industrial base funding that's going out there, a lot of the work training programs, we've involved governors, et cetera. And you're starting to see the number of workers come up. But it's still a very green labor workforce. And the last piece of this that we're going to have to go solve is the wage piece, because the attrition levels that we're seeing in the shipyards today, you can get them in the door, but we're having trouble keeping them. The attrition rate is 20% or more. In fact, up at Fincantieri, where we're trying to build a frigate, it's astronomically high. And so we've got to go solve that. So we've got to train them and we've got to pay them. And it's going to take 5 to 7 years before we get there. So the things that you mentioned, a constant steady demand signal, which I think we've seen over the last 5 to 7 years, has allowed industry to start making the investments and also start hiring the workforce that's going to be there to get where we need to be. But the history behind this has really caused the challenges that we have today. I think most of those are solvable. Certainly the workforce issue is solvable. We're going to have to be willing to pay them more to keep them. We're going to have to be willing to train them more. And the cost of building ships today, those ships are a lot more complex than they were built. I tell people, you could buy a Honda Accord back in 1972, and you can buy a Honda Accord today. They're not the same ship. So an aircraft carrier today is significantly different than the Nimitz that we built in 1975. And people will say to me, well, you paid $750 million for Nimitz, and you paid $13 billion for Ford. Why is that? Well, if you took everything that we've done to modernize Nimitz since 1975, and by the way, we keep them for 50 years, and she's still out there doing great things.
Tom, I don't want to cut you off, but right now I'm reliving the aircraft carrier hearing with you and Senator McCain, and I'd rather not go there.
Okay, but so I'll stop there. I think I've probably at least laid enough of the groundwork for the other people to talk about, but that's really kind of the reason we are where we are today, is because some of the decisions that we made over probably about a 20-year period, starting in the mid-90s.
I had a flashback to when you and I greeted President Trump on the Gerald R. Ford.
I was there.
To commission it.
Let's go back to steam. But okay, so we've defined the problem, and I'm going to turn now to an individual that sits atop the organization that's responsible for fixing the problem. Vice Admiral Downey, ComNavC, you and your PEO partners, you've got your arms around the issue. This is a tiger by the tail. Tom just discussed some of the initiatives in terms of workforce, et cetera. I want you to dive deeper into the health of the workforce, the infrastructure, the supply chain, and what you and the PEOs are doing with the whole of government approach here to solve those issues. And then how long is it going to take?
My remarks or to fix shipbuilding?
You got 5 minutes.
Okay. So 2 quick comments first. To the uniformed awardees, award winners, USNI forgot one part of your award. You all get a new set of orders. So we're meeting in the back at the end of this. Is that good? Yeah? I don't really care how you vote, but anyway. And then really glad to see Mr. Bollinger with us, because everybody else here is a former boss of mine. And I know I'm going to get a critique from each of them tonight, but I'm really interested in yours. So, well, a little bit on where we hit somewhat on where we are. I'll just want to briefly summarize that, and then we'll talk about what we're doing about it. So, over the last 40 to 50 years, we've gone from 35% of the national workforce in manufacturing to just over 10. Okay, so although the nation grows, that's where we are. We've cut the public shipyards in half. We've gone from 8 public yards to 4. And being an engineering duty officer, the folks that run most of those areas, we've cut that workforce even to a higher degree. So as we get into maintenance, you would be surprised that about 20% of us actually work in maintenance. Some are in R&D, and then many are in programs. So things that we've reshaped the uniform side of this as well. We've gone from multiple nuclear yards, private, to 2, and 17,000 suppliers to about 5,000. 30 private construction yards to 7. And we've gone from building nationally about 5% of the commercial ships in the world to less than 0.25%. So that's kind of where we are. Today, in the Navy, we have 93 ships under contract for construction. 93. You've got to read the fine print. That's all the option ships as well. that aren't really real yet until money comes in and we exercise those options. They range to get to how long? Those ships range from about 4 to 10 years to build, kind of destroyer to carrier. So quite a long time. Many of the current ships under contract, a significant portion of them were awarded pre-COVID, when you look at that 10-year range or 5, 6, 7, 8-year range. And the supplier base, and Congress has helped us with this, the supply chain is at least 1.5 times longer to supply than it used to be. So now we have 3 years of advanced procurement instead of 2. So there's a lot going on there. What are we doing about it? Since 2018, almost $10 billion invested via the various versions of what we call the MIB today. Submarine, surface ship combatants, and a few other initiatives. Those right now are going to 33 different states and over 700 supplier projects to improve the manufacturing processes, to reduce the time, and to create new companies to some degree or different branches, and a significant investment in additive manufacturing. So there's a lot going on there, but it takes quite a while to get there. So heavy emphasis on the supplier base, as well as the shipyards. Significant CapEx investments, billions and billions of dollars. People, over this next 8 or 9 years or so, our projections are we have to hire in the private sector 250,000 folks to do this work. 150,000 of that just for submarine construction. 250,000. Now that assumes the attrition rates that Admiral Moore was referencing, and in some places we see much higher than that. We referenced an area that's over 45% attrition for skilled labor.
Yeah, but we can't sustain that.
Right.
So we can't build a plan that assumes that we're going to be suffering 20, 30% attrition. We got to tackle that.
And in our most stable yards, our most mature yards are at or above 20%. So people, we were talking about wages a little bit before. So quick C story. ROTC Notre Dame, big Irish Catholic family, turned it down. My father was extremely happy with me. New York police officer, so I'll leave it at that. Got me a job with the Teamsters Union in 1982, one of 8 kids, to help pay for college, $15 an hour. 43 years ago. We used to be at, for these jobs, 4 to 5 times minimum wage, and today we're at 1.3. If we just take that labor on say a $4 billion ship, that entry-level labor, the lieutenant was hitting some of it, and raise that labor 25%, a $4 billion ship is $4,040 million. 1% increase. We have to, and we've just had a significant coordination with some of the submarine suppliers to do just that. In reality, the corporate focus, the investments drives the companies to focus on different things. So of course they want to deliver for us, but the incentive has not been to pay their people more money. Most of them, the more experienced yards have really good training and educational investments, but we can't keep the people past the first year. So yes, we are bringing in people, $18 to $22 for entry to join the company, and 0 days off in the first year. We have to turn all of that around. That's really our biggest area, because when you break down a ship, and you can get into direct and in other areas, more than 60% of all the money, when you actually look at the material areas as well, over 60% of the entire cost of the ship is actually labor. It's not the high-end radar and this and that, it is, but they're a much lower percent. So we are very focused on that. We're very focused on stabilization of the programs, block buys wherever possible. I will say across the administration, I regularly hear from seniors, get to what do you really think this ship is going to cost? And we have atrophied that capability. So we are really spending a lot of time on the government side on turning around design, cost engineering, and candidly program management to improve those areas. So investing in the infrastructure of the yard, the wages for those employees, huge investment in the supplier base, and those are really the areas we're focused on, Mrs. Secretary.
All right, so now this is one of my favorite Donald Rumsfeld quotes, which I fell back on quite often. If you can't solve the problem, enlarge the problem. So we're going to enlarge the problem here. And I'm going to turn to Marty. You know, in the face of these challenges, one of the true bright spots is that there's greater alignment today in terms of the Navy, DOD, the administration, and industry than there's been since the 600-ship Navy. So with that whole of government mindset, you know, what changes to policy and practice would you propose to the administration in order to clear the hurdles that stand in the way of investment in an infrastructure and workforce, greater partnering with foreign shipyards, and greater support for acquisition strategies that provide the stability that industry is yearning?
Anything else? Is that enough?
You got 5 minutes.
Okay. Let me step back a little bit, because about the alignment issue, I think we all agree that unless industry is fully aligned with the government, the Navy, Congress, it's going to be tough to get stuff done. And I do think there is a fundamental problem of misalignment, not when you talk about the executives running the industry. I think they're very aligned. But they've got another countervailing force that's pulling them in a different direction, and that's the owners, the investors of the company. At the end of the day, they get to call the shots. And if they don't like what management is doing, they will replace management, or they'll bring in a Raytheon former CEO as a board member. The challenge is, you know, think about what the owners want. It's really quite simple. They want a return on their investment, and here's the important part, that's commensurate with the risk we're asking them to undertake. We have lots of investors willing to embark on high-risk investments, Silicon Valley. Why? Because if it pays off, the payoff is huge. We have lots of people willing to take a low rate of return on their investment, government bonds. Why? Because the risk is low. I think what we have here is a mismatch between perceived return and perceived risk, and they have to become aligned. Let's think about returns in naval shipbuilding. It's tough to make a great return in naval shipbuilding. In a good year, you might make 10% margin on sales. The Navy's been very creative, things like share lines, trying to give an opportunity to boost that a little bit for superb performance. Electric Boat, Bath Iron Works, NASSCO's combined return on sales last quarter was 7%. Apple's was 32%. Microsoft was over 40%. So if I've got capital looking to where to invest that, I've got choices to make. And that's why it's tough to get a lot of the capital flowing in. Now, maybe you can have an argument that, yeah, margins are low, but I'm going to grow really, really fast. Tough to do in a budget-constrained and driven environment. With all respect to Newport News, they're not going to invent a new ship and have it in Walmart for Christmas. They're not going to start opening up markets in China. I hope not. It's a challenge to grow very quickly in defense. Now, compare that with a company like NVIDIA, which has grown 45% per year for the last 5 years. It's grown over 100% per year for the last 2 years. Guess where the money is going? So I don't think we can play the return game, which makes me think about the risk game. Investors are perfectly happy to invest in businesses, and I think employees, blue-collar workers, think very similarly, if they see the risk is acceptable given what they're going to get out of it. And I think we have a problem here, because naval shipbuilding, you can hear all the numbers we've been passing out about the shipbuilding plans, it's considered extremely, extremely risky by investors who take a long-term view. I cut my teeth working with Electric Boat, helping to take them from 5 submarines a year to 1 every other year. You know, people see that. Employees see that. Someone shows up at Groton or Quonset Point saying, I'm going to work in submarines. The young comes out and says, well, let me tell you what they did to me back in the 1990s. So it's tough. What can we do to reduce the risk? I think there's some things we can do. The most drastic solution is the investment should be made by somebody other than these shareholders. The assets should be owned by the government. Sounds outrageous. It's exactly what a company would do. Boeing couldn't find people making the right kind of interior parts. They got into business themselves. They weren't happy with the people assembling the fuselage. They brought it back in-house. Tough to do, not our way. It is how we do nuclear weapons, by the way. Government-owned, contractor-operated facilities. Short of that, there's a possibility of a take-or-pay mentality. You want a company to invest in another dry dock? Fine, you can commit to filling it for 5 years with work. After that, who knows? Well, the government could contract so that if it's not being used, they will accept the depreciation charge, they will accept the maintenance charge to keep it intact, share the risk. But the reality is, shipbuilding is risky. We said we're going to build 28, 29 Seawolf submarines, we built 3. We said we're going to build 32 DDG 1000s, we built 3. 50 LCSs, 38. Now we're talking about the Constellation program, and investors are like, whoa, do I really want to commit the capital? So I think we should stop focusing so much on profit as the motivator for industry and focus more on how do we make the risk acceptable to the people we need to start pouring capital and their own labor and careers and futures into the industry.
Thank you. We're going to pause right now and shift over to audience questions and answers. And I think there are mics set up. If somebody has a question from the audience wants to step up to the mic. In the meantime, I've got some questions that have come in by text. So while I see Mo Gaudier quickly. Okay, we're going to start on my starboard.
So not so much a question as an observation. I grew up in 757. I grew up in Williamsburg. Newport News Shipbuilding was the job du jour. It was security. But I think where you hit on it, which is the wage disparity. I mean, Newport News had the perfect model. It had the apprentice school. It trained. Most folks don't know the apprentice school was a D3 college level. So it was a great in-source, but the wages were there. And what you said, where it was 4 times, and we allowed that to deteriorate because it was the job of choice for security. That went away. And why, I don't understand. Now, shipyards don't need to become Apple. Shipyards, there's lots of defense money that understands that rate of return and will fund it for forever. But it's got to be some getting out of the box where you bring that wage level back up, because I think what you're saying, what happened is someone could go to the apprentice school, work a year in the dirt and grime, being an electrician, and go, why am I doing this when I can go work for Buc-ee's, or for an electrical company that was mom and pop and not doing the grime, et cetera. So it's, again, wages has got to come up, has got to get to where that disparity is no longer there. And I'm assuming that there's enough docks that if we had, and so I guess the back end question then comes as well. One, we're not funding. How much is CR? How much is not being able to see that consistency driving?
A quick response. So $18 to $22 an hour, roughly. We don't pay them a whole lot more to start in our naval shipyards, 22 to 26. So we don't value this in certain elements of the country, or the nation, period. That's where we've moved over the last 30 to 40 years. Last one related to it is back to what was said about how shipbuilding has changed in quantity and the cycles. When I came into the PO carrier job behind Admiral Antonio, I think is out here, and behind Admiral Moore, in 2019, in a yard with close to 30,000 people, 49% of the yard had 2 years or less experience. We changed programs. We changed the George Washington RCOH 3 times, start and stop, and we spread out carriers and a few other little tweaks on the submarine side. They all go together. So the program stability is really important.
Port side.
Yes, 2 questions, actually. One about our supply chain. Do we have a secure supply chain like in the United States, or we're reliant on other countries and possible supply chain problems? And secondly, Brett Sadler just nominated to be the new head of MARAD. How can we work with the commercial shipbuilding side to maybe increase capacity and consistency?
It's significantly domestic. There is some foreign You might have in an aircraft carrier 30-ish other countries involved in every state in the country. There's about 5,000 subcontracts to the carrier contract to provide supplies. So is it stable? No. Hence all the activity there.
Extremely brittle, right? I mean, you really almost literally have a situation where, you know, somebody has 2 weeks of sickness and you're going to see that translate to delays in delivery of an aircraft carrier.
Yes,
I mean, that's kind of how brittle this supply chain is.
Yeah, just a data point. So, you know, 70% of the suppliers today in the nuclear shipbuilding world are sole source. So, you know, to your point here.
I want to clarify, single source.
Single source. All right, so we have a single source. For 70% of the things we buy are coming from a single source. We have one person building turbines. We have one person building reduction gears. We have one person doing castings.
Yeah.
And so if they have a hiccup or a problem or then it causes the problems cascade.
And oh, by the way, I forget the exact word. It's not monopoly, but it's single source. Monopsony. Monopsony.
Yeah, monopsony.
Colonoscopy.
Don't go there. No, it's a monopsony.
Single source and single customer, right? So
single source, single customer.
Yeah.
Hey, there's an important point there. I apologize. Over to you. As Admiral Moore described the Nimitz program and four-year centers, et cetera, we funded Nimitz ships over 1 to 4 years. Within 4 years, appropriated years, a carrier was bought. That was the worst situation on 2 of them, and the others were 1 to 3. Ford was funded over 17 years.
Yeah.
JFK right now is at 16 years. The 2 ship buy, 80 and 81, we agreed to 8 years, and it's at 11 years. So we dole out a 10th or a 17th. So that's another reason why it's fragile. Those that we provide the funds to don't have the decision space to buy $10 billion worth of whatever they want to buy for us. On the 2 ship buy, we're doing much better, even though it's spread out. 81 has 60% more material at this point than 80 did when she was at this point. So it costs almost $1 billion more just due to phasing over the years to incrementally fund the ship.
I had the opportunity to look at 356 of the most critical suppliers on a big Navy shipbuilding program. I'm not supposed to say which one. And I looked at the ownership structure of each one and how it's been evolving. Every year, over 10% of that group of suppliers changed ownership. And a common pattern was a family-owned business that the family had been involved for generations, loved the business, felt connection with the Navy and the product, was selling out to a sort of generic private equity firm. There's some that specialize in Navy work like Compass or J.F. Lehman, but just people that knew nothing about the Navy and all they see is dollars. I worry about that. Yeah. And so, you know, when I become king in charge, I'm going to allocate a fund for Admiral Downey here to start buying out some of those suppliers to keep them focused on the work that needs to get done. I really worry about that fragility in the industrial base.
Thank you. Back to
yes, Rick Easton. Mr. Secretary, CNO, 2 NAVSEAs and an industry icon. Great panel and some really good insight. Stepping back just a little bit from a more macro perspective, I think, at this particular point in time. Somebody on the panel mentioned that the maritime industrial base is a subset or maybe a microcosm of the national industrial base. President Trump has secured arguably more than $6 trillion of investment, and even if only a portion of that comes to play, it's got to have a major impact on the national industrial base. How do you see that affecting the maritime industrial base? What do we need to do from a legislative perspective, potentially, to make sure that we can get to where we need to even just start increasing the number of ships in the United States Navy?
Well, I'll let somebody else take that, but I'm going to first say that if I go back to that 20 years ago and that 4-ship budget, the budget for SCN, shipbuilding budget, was $7.5 billion. And if you look at what it is today, it's $36 billion. And so there's more than inflation that's involved there. So while there's more dollars that are, I'll say, coming into the public trust, I'm not sure that today the shipbuilding enterprise can spend more dollars efficiently and effectively given the resources that they have in their hand today. So step A, build a plan. Step B, budget the plan. So I'm go immediately to my left here.
Yeah, I mean, I would just put an exclamation point on everything you said, and what we have to, I think, start to reorient towards output metrics instead of input metrics, right? I mean, this is how a business runs, right? If you don't meet your output metrics, you get like 1.5 quarters of not doing that, and we're going to find someone who can, right? So there's real accountability, I think. The rubber meets the road in the output metrics. So we've talked, I mean, you know, I forget the number, but we're going to hire, you know, thousands of more shipyard workers. I can't tell you the number of times when they said, hey, this, you know, this is the number. We get this number and it's cured. We're gonna, you know, give us this amount of funding, we'll hire these amount of workers, and it's done. You'll never have to hear from me again, except next year, right? So, you know, this is I think we can get intoxicated on input metrics. There's human nature to want to find some kind of thing that you can, a stoplight you can call green, but until you focus on output metrics, it's going to be a hard time to, hard to really get that accountability.
Could not agree more.
Yeah.
Please.
Admiral Downey, some of your remarks this evening led me to think that perhaps we would have done well to hear from Charlie Nemfakos as well. Wow. It's a little bit of a
blast from the past.
This is a question primarily for Admiral Downey, but I think anybody else could address it as well. I feel like we've heard some contradictory things across the range this evening. The encouraging public investments in the MIB notwithstanding, would you say that it's fair to describe the senior uniform leadership of the Navy today as viewing the shipbuilding crisis as a national industrial strategy problem or a procurement function?
All of the above. Yeah, that's kind of covers the gamut. I won't speak for the rest of the senior leadership of the Navy. I want to stay here for a while. As the CNO said, they want to see progress. Don't want to hear another set of numbers. Over to the question over here, there are accelerated buying approaches via the Forge Act and the Ships Act that we're working to employ. We have to get much less bureaucratic. Okay, I will tell you, I have a team going through 5,300 technical specifications to see what can we get rid of or go commercial. And they're 75% through them and with about 18 months of work. There's things there that we have to get through. On the procurement side, I will say a challenge we have with the Hill, throughout the government, is we don't really address what the cost of the ship is. We want to book ships. So we do these deals together, very aggressive negotiating back and forth. We book a quantity and we fund the program at the target value, meaning you have to perform at 100% perfect performance to do this for $1. And we know it's going to cost $1.60 or whatever it may be. So then we get into a cycle of having cost overruns when we didn't really budget to what the cost was. So it's a combination to your issue. Senior leadership wants to see performance. Done with excuses. How are we going to get there? The last one on that is on strategy. And 4 of the programs that you probably are tracking with challenges, they're all first of class with fixed price contracts. On the 93 ships I mentioned, 91 are fixed price contracts. It's pretty challenging for somebody to build an actual first of class with a fixed price approach. So that's a strategy issue. We are working on a governance approach that affects the strategy to improve the procurement approach.
Okay, I'm going to take one from online question here. It's from Mike Hogan of the Atlantic Council. With the current focus on surging capacity in the commercial shipbuilding industry, are you concerned that these ventures may be competing for the same labor pool as naval shipbuilding and that these efforts could adversely affect our ability to build warships? I'm going to ask each of you to quickly respond to that. I'll start at the far end here. Marty.
Absolutely.
You're concerned with increasing the commercial shipbuilding because it's going to compete with naval shipbuilding?
The supply is finite. It's going to bid up the prices and compete for demand.
Okay, Tom, now
I'll be even short.
put your former NAVSEA hat on, and on the flip side, your HII hat.
Yes, I agree 100%. I think right now it's a supply and demand issue. We don't have the capacity to build the ships that we need, the military ships we need. And if the government all of a sudden decides they want to get into the commercial shipbuilding and subsidize it heavily like it's done in Korea and Japan, I think that there will be some unintended consequences. So while I'm all for building more commercial ships in this country and for all the benefits that come with it, I think we have to be very careful that there's not an unintended consequence. So I think we have to watch this very, very carefully.
Yes, 2 quick points. Yes, absolutely will be if they're not already competing with each other because of the points made. We have gone to distributed shipbuilding in the last 4 or 5 years to build more units at smaller places, and that requires even more overhead related to those functions. So that's a bit of a concern, and that'll compete with commercial. And the other big area of concern is engineering. Many of these yards are not full-service yards, or these companies, and especially when you get into first of class, and that causes competition across the other parts of industry to try to provide that support infrastructure to those yards.
I'm going to take a contrary view and say I don't believe that that's the case. I think that the United States of America is a maritime nation, right? And maritime power has multiple dimensions, right? And commercial maritime power is maritime power, which is national power. And so I think that approaches that say, it's true. Everything that my colleagues on the panel have said today is true. If we had to, move our workforce away from naval shipbuilding into commercial right now, that would obviously be robbing Peter to pay Paul, right? But the 2B situation that we have to strive for would be to, increase the pie, right? We're going to have to build a bigger maritime industrial base, and then it will eventually serve to distribute the overhead costs and a lot of these costs so that the Navy or the U.S. government is not bearing all of those costs. And then I'm going to be a complete heretic that, we're not in the top 10 shipbuilders in the world. Right? The number 1 right now is China, but the number 2, 3, and there are very close allies. And I think that we should take some creative approaches, particularly as we build our domestic capacity. We should loosen up on the Jones Act a little bit for perhaps a constrained period of time for constrained and defined purpose to help us get this thing jump-started with some of our allies who can churn out ships, on time, on budget, very capably.
I'm going to invoke my partner, Mike Petters, who his basic philosophy was, if it's good for shipbuilding, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
And there's likely some near-term pain in terms of starting up, really rekindling a commercial shipbuilding industry in this country. But in the long term, I think it's the best, as you described, for a maritime nation. So, back to questions.
Yes, thank you. Mark Johnson, a former Naval Institute director. I know I'm coming at this at a bit of a different angle, but here goes. There is a famous French author who once said, "The future is not what it used to be." And I kind of get worried in terms of when you talk about hypersonics, you talk about autonomy, you talk about unmanned, just how fast things are moving with AI. And I just wonder, do we know what the architecture, the big architecture of all these ships looks like?
I've been waiting for this question, and I'm going to turn to Admiral Richardson. Because if you read your February's proceedings, he laid the groundwork for an approach to ship design that I think it was right at the heart of your question.
And can I just say, both design, but also you talked about 4 to 9 years to build. I mean, how do we know, again, what, unmanned autonomy versus manned? What does it look like 10 years from now with how fast logarithmically things are sort of
get
moving?
mathematical on us now.
Oh, sorry. I was an aerospace engineer.
I'll dive into that. the article basically lays out sort of a design to doing that, and it's not 10 years from now, it's today, actually, right? And so it sort of says that we don't have, right now, our acquisition system is, I think, fundamentally tuned or resonates at a frequency of delivering a platform, right? With the structure and everything else. And that was put in place, that's McNamara's system, right? With some tweaks on it. And yeah, we've got, a Mr. Potato Head OTA, and we've got a Mr. Potato Head DIU, and we put these things on. But the fundamental system hasn't really changed that much. It's very, very highly centralized. It's over-dependent on centralized analysis, et cetera, et cetera. So I think what we have to, so what I hypothesized or put forward was an acquisition system that really sort of understands that things are built in sort of three acquisition streams. One is what we have, structures, right? And I'm not saying, platforms are a thing of the past. I think that we need platforms. We need ships, we need aircraft, we need combat vehicles. We need those platforms. And they're going to be produced at their rate, which is the slowest rate, right? And they're going to last the entire life of that platform. So let's use a ship. I mean, we are at the Naval Institute, so it's not bad. So that's going to last, let's say, 40 years, right? The hull of that ship is going to last 40 years. We got to put some real thought into it, including its propulsion plant, power system, et cetera. But the real warfighting capacity, a lot of it, comes from the systems that we were going to put on that ship. That's another acquisition stream altogether, and it proceeds at a completely different pace. And it's relatively independent of the structure stream. So whereas that structure stream, let's say it's one a decade, that's generous. The system one is one every 3 to 5 years, okay? And then on top of that, now we have software, which is as fast as you can code it and test it and deploy it. Yeah. Right? So now we say, okay, what does that ship project look like? Well, it looks like putting together a project team with experts from each one of those streams, and it really becomes now an integration effort, right? We take the best of breed of each one of those streams, design it down into that particular ship, right? Whether it's a frigate and that's kind of how we started the frigate. Right? That was sort of the underlying philosophy for the Constellation class design, but we've lost our way on that, right? So, kind of to get at your point, that allows, another way to think about it. We talk about things like Moore's Law, where power doubles every 2 years, let's say, every 5 years, depending upon what part of that thing we're talking about. Another way to think about that, though, is in terms of half-lives, since you mentioned logarithms, and so if I put out the bleeding edge technology right now in microprocessors, right, and that thing is issued on day one, if it takes me 4 years to get through the contracting and design and testing and all of that. That's 2 half-lives. So I am actually issuing something that is 25% of the original combat power that I, pitched it when it was done. We've got to get better through all of those things, capture and harness the speed of each one of those acquisition streams, software, systems, and structures.
Thank you. Read the article for more in-depth. I think there's something there, and I think that we need to be talking about future ship programs that need to adopt it today. So for the last question, it's going to go to our ad hoc panel member, Lieutenant Kim. So you
no.
Here we go.
Lieutenant Kim. This question goes to Admiral Richardson now.
I thought you were going to answer the question.
Oh, sorry.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. All right. Well,
so
my enthusiasm just went down quite a bit.
I did want to address the productivity, which says if you run a business, as I'm in business school right now, you get 1.5 quarters of bad performance until you get canned. I feel like business is actually more brutal to survive than actually the Navy.
Could you restate that? I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
It's more brutal to survive in business than to survive in the Navy, it almost seems like.
2 quarters if you don't do the...
Yeah.
Oh, okay, got it, yeah.
And then, in speaking to the wages, and yes, we do need to bring the wages up, but the productivity of a welder now is not much or no better than it was 100 years ago. It's still a guy with a TIG welder making beads, and maybe they'll get X linear foot of welds per year. And the things, I don't think we've, or that in pipe fitting or that in any kind of manufacturing, I don't think we've made any jumps in that in the last, I'd say, 100 years, ever. And I almost feel like we can't justify a higher wage to our shipbuilders unless we could get that jump. Or what's, I guess?
Yeah, no, it's, I was making the point because we have to be focused. I think that the customer would be happy to pay a little bit higher wage if he could get the output metric to follow that investment, right? And so, to kind of the point that's been made on the panel, in many parts of business, you're not going to get a multiple like you're going to get in IT, right? I mean, that's just crazy multiples. Look at some of them that have been like 40, multiples of 40, et cetera. That's never going to happen for shipbuilding. But I think the point's been made that we've got to, I think as the customer, stop trying to grind the profit down to under 5%, otherwise we've got some kind of an outrage, and just focus on value, right? And so let's not worry about what their margins are. Let's get into what the value is. And to your point about the welders, that if you do a theory constraints type of analysis, hey, right now it's people, right? So there's lots of ways to get around this thing. Those shipbuilders that are in the top 5, they're using a ton of automation, just like you said. And so you've got people monitoring, not just one, but a host of machines, just making sure they're all doing what they need to do. And, that's another way to, I think, get that wage to give you a lot more productivity.
Agree. That's definitely, I think that's the one thing that that's the paper I'm writing right now is about the labor portion. And
all right.
You get a footnote.
Just make sure you footnote.
I'll have a footnote you, sir. I'll send you a draft. I'll send you a draft when I'm done with it.
Well, I want to thank Secretary Stackley and this distinguished panel. It's no surprise that we went long. Fascinating discussion. I think we could have gone another hour easily. So I'm going to invite you back, and I promise I'll pay you double next time what I paid you this time, if you'll promise to come back. But anyway, as a small token of our appreciation, our panelists will receive the book. We just talked about Brent Sadler. So by Brent Sadler, U.S. Naval Power in the 21st Century. So thank you again to our panelists. Great job. How about another round of applause for them? Thank you again to L3 Harris and Admiral Klunder for being here. Thanks to all our members and all our supporters and all of you here. Thanks for being here today. As we reflect on the year behind us and look to the future, we return to why the Naval Institute matters. In an era of renewed competition for global influence, advancing the understanding of sea power and the critical issues shaping national security and global security is not just important, it is urgent. As we embark on the next chapter, I invite you to stay engaged, continue your great support of the Institute, exercise your right as a member to vote in new board members, and finally, as always, if you're not a member, please join. If you are a member, please redouble your efforts and go find somebody who's not and get them to be a member. We appreciate all the help with recruiting. Thank you again for your attention. Thank you to all our speakers, panelists, and congrats again to all our award winners. And now that concludes the meeting, and I'd love to have you join us up on the topside terrace for a reception. Thank you so much.